You're watching BCTV. We're all about Branford. You're watching BCTV, Branford Government Television, a service of Branford Community Television. This program is brought to you in part through the support of the town of Branford.
Commissioner Matt Ormrod, present.
Anybody?
Commissioner Begemon, present.
Commissioner Boda, present.
Commissioner Papantonis, present.
And we have staff with us this evening.
Amy Frederick, and the wetland agent, present.
Katie Blanchett, Inland Wetland Associate, present.
Great. Does anybody have a time pressure this evening? No?
We were given the link of given the contents of the agenda and how nice it is, hoping for a fast meeting.
I just want to make sure that nobody had to recuse themselves at some point. So hearing none of that, let's move right along to the minutes for approval from March 9th, 2023. The minutes were sent out. Again, this is the regular meeting minutes from March 9th, 4 pages.
This is
Go ahead.
Commissioner Begemon. I have a couple of questions. Under the number 3 on page 1, the jurisdictional ruling request, I'm not sure if it's clear. Work is in the state right-of-way covered in the general permit given by the state. So the only work that the commissioner has jurisdiction over is the activity on private properties. It seems conflicting. It says work is in the state right-of-way.
It should probably say most of the work is in the state right-of-way. Yeah, I'll fix that.
Because I think there's only, okay. And then after David Roach starts speaking, I think there maybe is a typo. It said view shed is impeded by the vegetation.
Yeah, that actually was a term that he had used. It had to do with the visibility of the billboard. Okay. I mean, I can change it for clarity. That's fine. I just used the word that he used. So, and
then further down, I know that I think that your technique is like if you say David Roach, all habitats. And then the next lines are in his voice. But when it says it's a strategy we have used elsewhere in town with success, this is the first time we have done this kind of work for Lamar. I don't know. I find it a little confusing, so I don't know if I'm the only one.
Okay.
I don't know if we need to put that in quotes or if it's verbatim or if you're summarizing what, I'm not sure what we should do with that.
Okay, I'll make an adjustment and kind of put it just in general terms, not because that's what I usually try to do is just put it in terms that kind of summarizes what he says.
Yeah,
but
so if it's a strategy, Commissioner Begemon, if it's a strategy they have used elsewhere, this is the first time they have done this kind of work or something like that.
Yeah,
and then the other thing I saw on page 2 with the vote call at the top.
Yeah, I forgot Mark.
Okay.
I already fixed that, yeah.
Thank you.
This is Commissioner Bassam. I guess that does raise the question. Is there a protocol when if somebody speaks and has that on the record and it's confusing in its verbatim, how do we display or correct that if it's important in the minutes? Do we italicize something? Or is there no procedure and, we kind of roll it as we see?
My personal opinion is that minutes are not supposed to be a transcript, so we shouldn't be quoting in minutes. If there is something that is super important, then it should be in quotes. But really it should be a summary of what was discussed and not verbatim what was said by who. So I do think that there is some clarity that could be provided regarding kind of where some of these statements are being, where they came from, because if you didn't attend the meeting, it might be confusing. So not to cut short any of the conversation, or stop any further comments, but does the commission want to table review of these minutes until those revisions can be made, or move forward with the understanding that those?
I will say what happened is usually during the meeting, I kind of try to type, like if it's something that I feel as though is important, I will try to type it verbatim. And then usually I'll go back and kind of restructure it so that it's not verbatim. But sometimes I miss things. So I'm more than happy to go back and fix that. And then you guys can look at the minutes again next month if you'd like.
Yeah, I think even though none of these are hugely substantive, I think in the past we have tabled the approval of the minutes until the corrections can be made. So why don't we do that and keep that intact?
Absolutely.
Okay, moving right along. Applications for receipt. First up, Inland Wetland 230304, 34 Oak Hollow Road is attached garage 24 by 30. Jamie, do we have a summary on this?
Yes, so I believe the application materials were sent out in the first packets along with a brief staff report. They're proposing a detached 2-car garage and associated drainage improvements. I had some questions for the applicant, which mostly have been addressed, but I also have some questions for the commission regarding particularly the drainage requirements for this application. So they are showing, let me pull this up, and I don't believe there's anyone here for the application. All right, is everyone seeing site plan?
Yeah.
Okay, so a little bit different symbology than we're used to, but this line of circles is the erosion controls. Here's the existing house, existing driveway, proposed garage with the downspouts to be collected into box drains that will be covered on the top so they're not yard drains, and discharged to a level spreader over somewhat close to the wetland line, which is this little V caret shaped symbology line over here. Also, if you look at the site plan, it looks like there's a shed in the wetland. The shed is actually, in fact, just north of the wetland. That was one of the things I had asked to have looked at on the survey, and I have gone out to the field and seen the flagging and the shed and confirmed it's not in the wetland area, but it is pretty close to it. So,
is the map I'm looking at that was sent out looks to be different than the map that you are.
So there's 3 pages, and I think we did one of the first page is front and back. So you might need to flip over the site plan. Is this what you're looking at?
Thank you. Yep, got it.
There's also a slight discrepancy in the location of the shed between the 2 site plans. Nothing that should really have much of an impact on the wetland, but I've also asked for that to be clarified, just to make sure everyone's on the same page and it's being constructed where it's proposed. So my question to the commission is, do you want drainage calculations? Do you want a perk test for the proposed level spreader location prior to implementation? And do you want to hold on to this application for review at the May meeting, or do you think it's appropriate for agent review?
And the level spreader is where again? Is Chris
The level spreader is located in the southwest corner of disturbance, pretty much.
And Jamie, this is Commissioner Bodo. What's the distance between the level spreader and the wetland line?
I believe it's approximately 10 or 15 feet, if I remember correctly. Let me look it up. And the wetland complex behind this property, particularly further south, has had a history of flooding issues. I know the property owner of the subject property has said he's not had any flooding issues, but generally there have been flooding issues in this area. So just wanted to mention that. All right. At its closest location, it's about 13 feet.
Well, where, so the perk test that you were wondering about, where were you envisioning, like, because the level spreader is just, its function is just to slow the water down and to dissipate the energy, yes?
So, sorry, so here's the detail for the level spreader. It's underground, and it's proposed to have grass over the top. So it's kind of more of an infiltrator in my understanding of it than...
It sounds like it if it's underground.
Yeah. Which is the third page of the 11 by 17s.
And are they, excuse me, is the intention that they'll get the first flush? But it's off of,
So
just for a shed?
it's for a 2-car garage, and then the overflow is the bypass. There's a bypass T, so it would basically overflow and discharge at grade. So kind of my thought is, if this infiltrator level spreader isn't going to really, if it's going to be in groundwater, it would probably make more sense to have it just sheet flow from the garage or do some alternative drainage management. So rather than, dig up a trench across the yard and put in stone. So I don't know.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Boda. I tend to agree that means anything that close to the wetland, I can't imagine they're going to get much infiltration there. I'm not really sure what the function of putting it underground would be that close to the wetland. I guess I would like to hear from the engineers why that, or they could do a perk test. I don't know. Maybe somebody else has thoughts on why that, I don't know. I don't understand that.
Mr. Bassman, Jimmy, is the garage expected to have a gutter system, or is it just going to roll off the roof?
This would be collecting the water from the gutter system of the garage.
And your sense is that the runoff in an intense storm would still not be something that downstream effects wouldn't be felt, the neighboring property?
I guess my concern would be if this is going to be in what would be standing water during a rain event, it's not really going to provide any storage or retention or detention, at which point it might make more sense for it actually to be discharged at the base of the garage and have the length of the yard to flow over prior to entering the wetland. or some other alternative drainage system if the homeowner doesn't want to have it sheet flow.
How much yard are we talking here for it to, dissipate?
So from the garage to the wetlands, about 40 feet.
Hmm.
It looks like I didn't throw the pictures in the Dropbox, but I believe I do have some pictures of the yard if you think that would be helpful.
I mean, this is Commissioner Boda. I wouldn't want this to go to agent review. I think we should look at this one more closely. I think if you're going to go back to the property owner, I think it would be with these couple of questions of, we need some clarification on why they are trying to infiltrate. Like, can the ground there even take any of that water in so they can do a perk test? They could also consider a different way to manage this water coming in, because it doesn't make any sense to have it infiltrate that close to the wetland. But maybe their engineer has a solid explanation as to why. But I would just be curious to hear from their engineering how they came up with this plan and what are some other things that they considered on there as they planned.
This Commissioner Basson, I think as well, I don't see any, and maybe it's just not fact, but any calculations regarding the hydrology.
Yeah, I did have a brief conversation with the engineer about the fact that there were no calculations or perk tests. He said he did have a conversation with the client that those things might be required and that he could submit them upon request. So given the timing of when I had that conversation in the meeting, I figured I'd ask the commission. So I will follow up, and it'll be continued to the May meeting.
Next up, inland wetland 230305, 122 Flat Rock Road for a pool. Possible agent approval.
Jamie Frederick, inland wetland agent. So I met with the pool contractor on site based on what we discussed, the scope of work. I said it could be an agent approval, but the application materials that were submitted kind of lacked some clarity and information, made it look like activity was going on to a slope. So I'm looking for additional information to clarify. If the commission wants, I can pull it up and show you, but otherwise we can keep moving. If I don't get the information, it'll be before you again in May.
I think the latter makes a lot of sense at this point. Inland wetland 230402, 91 Standard Avenue, deck addition. Again, possible agent review.
This one I plan to do as an agent review. It just came in on Monday. I was out Monday. I was out Wednesday. So I haven't had a chance to process it.
Moving right along. Inland wetland 230403, 3537 Harrison Avenue. Proposed construction of two new two-unit residential buildings.
I'm not sure if the agenda is wrong or if I misheard, but it's one new building, 2 units. And I believe we have somebody present to give a brief overview of the application.
Yep. Good evening, Chuck Mandel. I'm the agent for the applicant. Yeah, so we are proposing a 2 units with 2 units, 2-bedroom units, slab on grade. We had Bob Russo, soil scientist, go out there. He investigated.
Mr. Mandel, sorry, just a quick interruption because Commissioner Boda, can you say the address again? I couldn't hear.
Yeah, it's 3537 Harrison Avenue. It's
Thank you.
Directly across from the Branford police station and the food sharing area. So we had Bob Russo go and do an investigation out there. There are no inland wetlands present on the site. The commission did receive a wetlands report that was in March 4th, 1999. from Kenneth Stevens, soil scientist. And in that report, the adjacent property, even though we do show there is a wetland boundary, it was all eudorthic, it was all filled wetlands. So if you go out there today, there is no wetland characteristics on the site. Our proposal is about 19.6 feet away from this filled wetlands. In light of, I should have asked for an agent approval to save time, but that's up to the commission. If they want to set a walk, feel free to, I will stake out the buildings if they want to see it. The garage that we're showing to the west is just a future proposal. We're not proposing that at this time, but we did show that in case we could get the approvals. We're just going to add that, but we're not really prepared to do the construction at the same time with the other structure. We're also proposing to capture the first inch of stormwater. That's that cyan to the east of the building.
This is Commissioner Bassman, just to make sure I understand the clarity associated with what used to be a wetland is no longer. When was that determined?
So on our site, there are no wetlands, and the site to the north in 1999, it was a filled wetlands.
So,
yeah, there's the report right there.
So just to clarify, in the 1999 investigation, it was still considered wetlands on the adjacent property. It says shallow fill, and based on the wetland delineation approval at the time, it was still considered a wetland, but it was an impacted wetland. They did do a wetland investigation for the subject property. There are no wetlands on the subject property. I do think there is a slight sliver of wetland area, essentially. So this is the subject property right here, the existing house, demoed garage, and the proposed structure would go somewhere in this area here. I think there's a little bit of wetland still existing adjacent to this parking lot, and there's definitely wetland further north and west of the subject property. So I do think it's still within the commission's jurisdiction. I do think it's I think this area of 42 Park Place, if it were to be redelineated today, it might go from slight fill to having characteristics that would no longer be wetland. I don't know. So that's kind of the wetland history for the off-site portion.
Yeah, Katie, if you go to Chuck Mandel, if you go to the GIS, it appears to be lawn area right now. And
This is Commissioner Bassman. What in the subject property 3537, it looks like there is kind of an elliptical, I don't know if it's a depression or not. Yeah, what's that?
That's a contour. My guess is it's showing as a slightly higher elevation. It could just be because of the tree cover, or it could actually be a slight high spot. I'm not sure.
Yeah, Chuck Mandel, Commissioner Basco, we did do some topography. If you go back to the site plan, Katie, it's relatively flat, but there has been some activity, I guess. So you can depression right in the center, right there. Oh, actually, that's a tree right there, but it could have pushed the grade up, so the aerial contours might have shown that as a little hump in the lot.
Thank you.
And I'm sorry to interrupt. It is on public sewers and water and gas there also.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Does any commissioner feel the need for a updated assessment of wetlands or not?
Well, so to clarify, they did do an updated wetland assessment on site. We can't require them to do off-site wetland investigation. So my assumption is that there's still some remnant of inland wetland, which is why I required that they submit an inland wetland application. So I would say there's no further wetland investigation for them to conduct. They've submitted the new wetland. Yeah, right here, CLA engineers, soil scientists. Robert Russo went out October 21st, 2022, and investigated on site. The soils at the site show signs of past alteration and no wetlands or watercourses regulated by the town or state were present.
And Chuck Mandel, in addition, that band of wetlands that Katie's referring to is actually there. That's been filled. The adjacent lot, that's all parking right now, and so there's a large. Let's see. Yeah. So, I mean, if you went to the aerial, the GIS aerial, you could see that that's all paved parking right now. Oh, you can see the cars parked along there, and that's a relatively steep embankment right there.
Yeah, and at the base of that embankment, there's standing water at times. So
that's absolutely possible. Yes, but it appears to be a very low value. If it is wetlands, it's been severely compromised at this point, and our proposal is going to create no additional impact to that wetlands.
Commissioner Basserman, Jamie, have you been out at the site?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. I have been out to the site. They are renovating the existing structure in the front, and I went out to discuss the removal of the existing garage and an old shed. It's a relatively flat site, slab on grade. It shouldn't be too much disturbance. I probably have a couple of questions. I haven't spent a lot of time looking at this because it came in fairly recently. But some thoughts I had were stockpiling location, which should be pretty minimal, but still going to need to stockpile. And is there any proposed landscaping? Essentially, of particular interest would be along this property line near where the wetland is. Or are you looking to just use the existing landscape?
There's an existing barrier right there now, vegetated along the property line. It's mostly a lot of invasives, but we weren't planning on touching anything along the property line.
So nothing would be planted in between the.
We're not proposing anything. As you said, it's a compromised, partially filled wetlands already. I'm sure there may be some landscaping, but there is nothing on this proposal at this point. It was just to leave the existing vegetation along the property line. You can see there's a pine tree there. There's some smaller pines that probably weren't located, but we did locate some of the larger trees along the property line.
Would you be looking to save that pine tree? Or?
Yes. Yep. We show the silt fence going through it, but we wouldn't do that. We're not proposing to touch anything that we don't have to along the property line. There'd be a good 10, 15-foot buffer.
Commissioner Basserman, any other concerns from the commission? At this point, is this a possible agent approval? Jamie, do you have any reservations about agent approval?
I'm on the fence on this one. I'm going to leave it up to the commission. I used to live in this area. I really do think that there is some remnant wetland there, but to what extent, I don't know. And with it being slab on grade and with the parking being proposed as gravel, and having the stormwater and a majority of the backyard, you can see these isolated trees. It is existing maintained lawn area. So I don't know.
This is Commissioner Rhoda. I think part of the challenge is it's sort of given the scale of it, it's right on the line of something that would go for agent approval, but usually that's for like sheds and stuff, maybe a single house. But given the nature, I would say if you're comfortable kind of taking the first crack at it, and if something, as you're starting to do the review, it can always come back to the commission in May. I think it's on the line, but I would say that it seems more appropriate for agent approval unless, as you're in the course of review, if something comes up that isn't really apparent here, in which case it could come back to the commission in May.
Okay.
Any commissioner, this is Commissioner Bassman, any commissioner feel differently? Okay. Inland Wetland 230404, 117 Flax Mill Road, in-ground swimming pool and patio. And I see first up under the enforcement area is 117 Flax Mill. Are we going to have two separate discussions on this, or can we combine it? Is there, is that a no-no?
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. I think we can kind of combine the discussion if you would like. However, decisions need to be made independently for each file. So,
Okay,
But would it, this is Commissioner Boda, would it make sense to just review what the cease and correct is? Because I would infer that the application is to satisfy the cease and correct. And so if we reviewed the cease and correct, we can then determine, one, what we want to do with the application, and then two, if it satisfies the cease and correct, instead of starting with the application and then having to like kind of, do you know what I mean?
So I do know what you mean. The application is not specifically to address the violation. So let's see. I think we might have the property owner present.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
John Sula, 117 Fox Mill
Are we
Road.
expecting anyone else for your project?
Unfortunately, Matt is stuck in an airport, or he got stuck on vacation, so he's in the air, and I'm it tonight.
Okay. So
given the application is not to correct the cease and correct, should we keep them separate in our discussion as well?
I think so. There's the fact that there is an open violation on the property that needs to be resolved, which I do think is a consideration relative to the inland wetland application. And so the homeowner stopped in, was interested in putting in a pool. We talked about the process. We talked about the fact there was an existing violation on the, so I'm going to kind of set the stage about both and we can go from there. So there's an existing violation.
Jamie, I think given the conversation we've had so far and Commissioner Boda's suggestion that we start with the cease and correct, why don't we amend the order here? Let's deal with that cease and correct first. You can provide the background and all that kind of stuff, and then we'll deal with the application. I think it'd be too confusing to try to combine the two, have a discussion when one may not be germane to the other.
Okay. So cease and correct order was issued in 2013 for filling adjacent to and within a wetland area. It was a different property owner at the time. The cease and correct order was filed on the land records. It's still on the land records. There was a mitigation plan reviewed and approved, but it was never implemented. And it appears that additional filling occurred at least in around 2015, at which point a notice of violation was sent to the property owner because the initial cease and correct order was sent to the person that conducted the violation. And a citation was started, it was issued, but it was never collected. And no additional enforcement action really has been taken since that 2015, 2016 timeframe. The restoration plan was a kind of belt and suspenders thing where says the fill will be removed back to the pre-existing armoring on the slope. This is depicted in photos of 2006. So there was no formal site plan showing what was supposed to happen. There is a GIS sketch in the file that I think was approximating that location. But like I said, additional filling occurred post the 2013 order, and no additional orders were issued. So the question the new property owner has is, first of all, how does he get this violation off his land records? And second, does it make sense at this point, 10 years later, to go in and remove all of that material? Would it be a benefit to the wetland? So he did have Matt Davison go out, do a new wetland delineation, and excuse me, kind of look at what made sense relative to the approved mitigation plan and the current site conditions and the time that has passed. So everyone should have received, hopefully, a copy of that. I just sent it out on Tuesday, so hopefully you got it yesterday or today. There isn't a revised mitigation plan completed yet, so much as the proposal that it might make more sense to not bring in heavy equipment, which be a little bit difficult to get back there and pull out all of that material, but rather to pull out some of the fallen debris on the slope and vegetate it with plantings. So let's see.
Mr. Commissioner Vassar, just so I make sure I understood what you said, that the cease and correct was issued to the violator, not to the owner?
Initially, yes, that is correct.
And is that a practice that is normally done that way, especially if it ends up going on the owner's land record?
So I think it's a bit of a unique situation where the violator was residing at the property, but not a homeowner. And I'm not sure if that was noticed at the time. But it can be issued to a violator, but as far as it being filed on the land records, usually it would be issued to the property owner when you're doing that.
This is Commissioner Begemon. Jamie, can you give us an idea of where the wetlands are fairly close in compared to the depth of the lot? So where was the fill placed? Can you show us on a
let's see,
screen?
I'm going to actually, probably this is, all right, so this is an aerial image from 2016, so kind of recent, and you can kind of see that this area in here looks like it's been disturbed. I'm going to actually jump to the last photo. So this is 2006. You can see there's a pretty distinct edge of lawn. Going to 2008, you can see it looks like there's been some disturbance. And then 2014, you can see there's like a bit of a wall here. So, and then this is the 2016. So the fill to the rear of the property and a little bit to the north of the property as well.
And on this, Commissioner Begum, on that same picture that you got up right now from 2016, do you have any idea of where in the wetland delineation is?
Yeah. So this is a 2019 aerial image, I believe. And so here's the contour showing the edge of, this is the limits, I would say, of the fill right here where the contours kind of bunch up. So there definitely was filling of wetland area. I did do a brief markup of this old wetland delineation. Okay, so this is the site plan for what the homeowner is looking to do. And this back here is, it's a section of the site plan. The red line with the WL numbers, that's the new wetland delineation that was done this year. This pink highlight is an approximate location based on me overlaying the old survey over the new, of where the wetland was back in 2004. There were multiple violations between 2004 and 2013. So what falls into where, I'm not really sure, because he had other fill that previous owner had other fill that he had to remove, and that violation was satisfied. So some of that, it's not clear to me where fill over time has been. This is the first time that we've gotten an updated survey showing what the conditions on site are currently since 2004.
I'm just this is Katie Blanchett, Inland Wetland Associate. I'm just gonna jump in. This property owner, the previous property owner for this parcel was also dumping on the neighbor's property for 275, I think it's 275 Northford Road. And so he had multiple violations having to do with that property as well. So there is a very kind of sordid history of that site. So it's been a problem for a while. And if I recall, the fill for the other site, they had to remove some of it, but they also were allowed to leave some of it, to give you perspective.
The mitigation plan that was never enacted, what did that entail?
So the mitigation plan was submitted, and then the commission made a decision that modified that plan. So, the original plan basically was to they were looking at cut trees felled into wetlands so woody debris makes contact with ground, remove wood chips placed in wetlands, seed the underlying original upland side slope grade and wetland area where fill was removed. And then the commission, there's more to it, but those are kind of the takeaways. And then the commission determines the fill will be removed back to the pre-existing armoring on the slope. This is depicted in photos in 2006. A thin layer of wood chips will be placed as mulch on the armored slope. Work to remove fill will begin as soon as possible, depending upon weather. When fill is removed, contact for inspection. The area will be seeded with a native herbaceous seed mix as soon as weather permits. Native shrubs will be planted along the top of the armored slope. The plan must be submitted to the IWEO for approval prior to planting. Plantings will be installed in spring of 2014. And after that, the wetland enforcement officer did issue a letter to the homeowner when she noticed additional activity occurring on site, additional fill, and started the citation process, but there's no additional orders or requirements from the commission.
This it's
Been out there?
yeah.
Have you been out there, Jamie, to observe?
I did go out to the site with the property owner and a representative from the pool company. And I did grab a couple of photos that's in the application file.
This Commissioner Bass, I guess my question is the mitigation plan from 10 years ago still viable with the conditions that exist today?
So I think difficulties would include the fact that the disturbance of getting in there with equipment and removing that, having that whole slope be destabilized, not really knowing what material is in that slope. In previous pictures, it looks like there's fallen trees and whatnot that may have been buried, and I don't know what kind of material was brought in for the fill. Also knowing like where to bring the slope back to. And I'm going to jump around. I'm going to go to one of the pictures from 2006 because I think it helps with perspective a bit.
Well, this Commissioner Bassett, while you're pulling that up, do we a plan that addresses the cease and correct 131101 at this point? Not the pool, but the correction of the violation.
No. So, okay. So we've got a written out plan that was approved in 2014. And I believe the current property owner is looking to change that to not have to remove the fill. But before creating a plan along those lines, he wanted to test the water and make sure the commission might be open to that concept. And he was hoping his wetland scientist would be here to discuss his observations, his professional opinion, but it sounds like he's stuck traveling. So we don't have that to kind of work into the commission's thoughts and reviews. But
This Commissioner Bassett, I guess without that, how do we move forward on the cease and correct?
well, we do have the written report from his soil scientist, which was sent out to the commission. So,
but generally, generally we have somebody that we can address questions to regarding that report.
And if you feel that you need to table it until he can be present, then that might be what you decide you need to do.
I can also answer those questions as a homeowner. I mean, I talked to Matt earlier. So, I mean, if there's questions based off the letter that he submitted, then I'm happy to answer them.
This Commissioner Bassett, I understand that, but it doesn't seem to me have the same weight as if they were coming from a wetland professional.
This is Commissioner Begman. One of the things that Matt Davison's report says is that there seems to have been a microburst in the area, and additional woody debris from fallen trees that came from that microburst. And this material further complicates fill removal.
Yes. Yeah, and we actually had a violation on the neighboring property to the south due to that microburst damage. They were chipping trees. There's a lot of trees that came down, and I think a lot of trees came down on the subject property in part due to the fact that they'd been filled against. So it would be a lot of disturbance and a lot of activity to remove the fill. I don't know if the commission would find it helpful to do a site visit, see for yourselves what the current site condition looks like.
So this is Commissioner Boda. I'm wondering about, the state has given us guidance on the order in which mitigation should happen based on particular ability or inability. And if we can't restore those existing wetlands to their more natural previous state, then the state gives us guidance that the next thing, I can't remember the exact order, but I think it's like enhance, right? And so I'm wondering, just thinking back up to the map, you had the part of the wetland that's the majority of the slope seems to be sitting on top of, and then facing the map right here would be the right-hand side. So I don't know if that is east or what direction that is, but if let's say that the wetland continues on the slope, if perhaps what Mr. Davis might consider is how can we enhance the other side of the wetlands. If there was a microburst, it could be that there's invasives down there that weren't able to get a foothold before. I'm not sure without doing a site walk what would be feasible, but he's also the wetland scientist, so he would be able to say better anyway. And so, native plantings are a nice gesture. I'm never going to say no native plantings or a pollinator habitat, but our function is to be a wetland commission, and first and foremost is to restore or enhance wetlands. And so I'm wondering if it would make sense to then do some mitigation where we can closer to the wetlands.
So it kind of, and aside from just seeding the slope and putting plantings at the top, since the slope isn't being pulled back, assisting that with some enhancement of the remaining adjacent wetland area is what you're saying.
Yeah, because what he's proposing, again, I think a site walk would help, but it's not doing anything to the wetland. It's doing something to the slope, which is not really we're not mini EPA, right? Like everybody's made that clear. But our purpose is to protect, enhance wetlands, and where you cannot mitigate, then you enhance or create. And so, that would be another option, would be to, on the other side of the slope, potentially creating some space for new wetland to form to make up for the lost wetland. So I think that there are multiple viable options that speak more directly to making up for wetland loss than putting in some native plantings. And that's, again, guidance from the state on what we're to do when we cannot necessarily, when it does not make sense to mitigate the wetlands that have been impacted themselves.
So I'll just read a regulation which is based on the state statute regarding what you're talking about, Commissioner Boda. Compensation measures should be considered in the following order of priority. 1, restoration pre-existing wetland or water course. 2, enhance degraded wetland or water course to improve functions and values they provide, which I think is what you're recommending. And then 3, create productive wetlands or water course resources. I think based on the slope, relative to where the wetland is, there might not be a lot of opportunity for that third one, but 2 is the preferred option over 3 anyways. So, I don't want to interrupt anyone else's thoughts, but I'll just scroll through some pictures. So this is taken from the lawn area looking out towards the wetland. This is the top of the slope right here. And you can see there's a ton of down trees in the wetland area. This is looking at the ledge area. I'm not really sure why I took this picture. So again, here's the top of the slope. The slope area, it's a bunch of loose material. And the homeowner has asked if he can remove some of this material. And I said he should wait until this meeting and ask the commission if he can remove any of this or if he needs to wait for his plan to be approved. The concern being what's underneath this material and whether this slope would be bare soil, which could then erode into the wetland area. And again, this is the wetland area, all the down trees. So that's kind of what the existing condition on site is. Now, this is just on the north side of the site. I didn't take any pictures closer to the storm drain outlet.
So,
and the discussion that we had over the last 15, 20 minutes to provide guidance to the homeowner that he can share with, Davison, addressing the concerns that Commissioner Boda raised as kind of a broader picture of how to deal with the wetland impact.
All right, so it sounds like the commission is open to receiving a modified restoration plan for consideration to resolve the enforcement order based on that discussion, with that information being submitted. Oops, sorry. Any other discussion, questions, comments on the enforcement order?
this is Commissioner Begeman. The soil scientist put in his report that it would be difficult to get machinery in there, but some of that stuff, looks like it could be gotten out by hand, like that Christmas tree that's been cut and thrown over there. And
yeah, and I think that's the kind of stuff the homeowner's wondering if he can go in and pull out. So I think like the Christmas tree, it's not going to destabilize the slope for him to go in and pull out.
so, Commissioner Begeman, so those details, that gets written up in the modification?
I think so the modified restoration plan should include like the original order requested, in my opinion, unless, the homeowner can present whatever, but I think a good kind of thing would be to have those plantings at the top of the slope as originally recommended, to vegetate the slope, which would result in needing to pull out that material sitting on top of the slope so that you have something you could vegetate. Granted, I don't know what the condition is underneath that. I don't know if there's topsoil that you can seed or not. It would probably also need to include an erosion control plan to make sure that while you're working on that slope and establishing that vegetated cover, you don't have any further impact to the wetland area at the base of the slope. And to Commissioner Boda's comments, if he's looking to keep to not have to remove the fill, some enhancement of the wetland area adjacent to that slope where the fill has occurred to try and restore that existing wetland area that's been heavily impacted from the fill and subsequent storms.
Commissioner Bassman, where does the property line in this picture rest, Jimmy? Is it on this side or the other side of that tree that's right in the middle standing up?
I do not know where the property line is, but
It's well on the other side of that tree that's bent over.
So there's
Sorry.
a lot of fallen
it's
trees
pretty far
area
back.
that is on your property, right?
I'm sorry, what was the question again?
And then a lot of the trees that were in that picture, if you said it's way on the other side, those fallen
Here's the house.
Yeah.
Here's the wetland line, and the property line's
way back.
quite
Okay.
far back.
Got it.
And all of those trees are large trees that are just down in contact with the earth. You can kind of see them on basically the wetland line and on the other side of the wetland line. And on the slope itself, there's like a lot of like woody debris, cut limbs, things like that. But that's what's on the slope. The Christmas tree, that stuff that's what I'm looking to do. Just general homeowner spring cleanup with brush, all that dry brush.
Not to include those fallen large trees.
No, I don't. I would not. I'd rather not move all those fallen large trees. When Matt Davidson came out, he felt that would disturb a lot of wetland area, just because those are the ones that came down in the microburst. Some of them still have large root piles that are attached to them. So because he walked through there and felt a lot of that was in contact with the soil itself, he felt that over time that'll just eventually become part of the ecosystem back there.
Okay. Thank you.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think it'll probably come up with the pool anyway, but I think this also probably warrants a a site walk. I think it would be helpful for us to better see the state of the wetland and what's going on with some of that cover. It probably makes sense to remove that cover, but like the how you do that and the what gets removed, that should be done thoughtfully, I think, to not make things worse.
This is John Sewell, the homeowner again, and that's my intention, is to not bring any machines and go near the wetlands to disturb anything. The pool is staying away from the wetlands, so obviously that's a separate thing. But in the violation, I mean, I don't plan on bringing any machinery in, more of my own two hands and general homeowner yard cleanup stuff. Not to disturb any of the wetlands, and then to enhance and, plant along the edge to, it's my yard. I want it to look nice. I have deer and stuff that come back there. So I'm not really looking to disturb anything with that.
This is Commissioner Baskin. Do you feel you have enough understanding of the Commission's comments this evening to share with Mr. Davison so that we can review a plan at our May meeting?
Yeah, I mean, I guess my only question is, given the time of everything being at the spring and wanting to do spring planting and spring cleanup, I was hoping that I could start moving forward with that and get just that loose debris and things like that cleaned up so that, we can start to move forward.
Well, just Commissioner, maybe with the site walk, we'll see enough of evidence in the site walk that we could give you the okay on what material can be removed. I think to the point that Commissioner Boda made, I think we got to see it with our own eyes to make sure that we think we're not doing more damage to the wetlands with particular material that's removed. So why don't we try to schedule an early site walk so that if there is an easy fix to some of the debris that the homeowner would like to remove, that we can get going on that while we're putting together the mitigation plan for review at the May meeting.
So just for clarification, a site walk is for orientation purposes only. The content of an application or a violation cannot be discussed at a site walk. So you can schedule a site walk if you want to give the homeowner further direction prior to the next regularly scheduled meeting, which is May 11th. Then you would have to schedule another special meeting to have that discussion. Although I think it could be helpful to have a site walk prior to the May 11th meeting, have the homeowner work with the soil scientist to create a revised restoration plan based on the discussion this evening, have the soil scientist address what he thinks would be a good idea for the removal of the slope. And then that way, when it's presented at the May 11th meeting, the commission can review it with an understanding of what the condition is and hopefully be able to make a decision so that the homeowner might be able to plant this spring season. Especially with some of those spring plantings that you can't really plant in the fall. Does the commission?
Commissioner Bassford, for clarity purposes, Jamie, then you're saying that basically everything stays put until the May 11th meeting?
Unless there's something the commission, unless the commission's comfortable giving him any guidance tonight on what he can remove. Like the Christmas tree, I think one commissioner mentioned, I would agree. I don't see how that would disturb the slope. I would say anything that has solid contact with the ground, where if you're going to be moving it, it's going to provide bare dirt. It shouldn't be touched until you have a full plan. I don't know if the commission's comfortable with that kind of guidance, or if you just don't want them to touch it until you've got the revised plan.
This is Commissioner Bassford. While the site walk has limitations on what it can do without a commission meeting, Staff could go out and advise, could it not?
If you wanted to defer to staff, then you could do that. We could do that way, yes.
And I'm saying for the stuff that you don't feel impacts the wetland, Christmas tree, or other debris, doesn't have contact with the ground, you can give the okay at that point so that the removal activity could commence before the May 11th meeting, and then we'll look at the big picture at May 11th.
If the commission is comfortable with that, we could proceed that way.
Anybody feel?
Commissioner Bigman, I'm okay with that.
Commissioner Papantonis, I'm okay with that.
Commissioner Arman?
Commissioner Ormrod, yeah, I'm good with that.
Does the commission?
Is that a thumbs up that I see?
Yeah, that works. I mean, I think is the plan then that we go out for the site walk and Jamie also goes out, or?
I mean, that would probably be convenient for the homeowner.
I think we're going to need to anyway for the pool, and then this way, you know, while we can't have a meeting about it, I think we are able to individually speak to Jamie. I mean, we can't have a meeting, but I think if Jamie has any questions for us, I think we would probably be on the same page anyway.
Yeah, I guess I'm concerned about the process. I didn't want to encumber Jamie's review and recommendations to the homeowner with the fact that it's a scheduled site walk. So in my mind, it was a separate review and a quick review so that there would be no process encumbrances.
We can work. I can work that out with the homeowner. If the homeowner wants to try and meet out there next week so we can get going, and you guys don't want to have the site walk until next month, then we can arrange that. So
Fine.
I'm flexible.
This Commissioner Papantonis, I'd be okay with doing the site walk sooner rather than later, if that works for you. You don't have to go out twice.
Does anyone want to suggest a time for the site walk? A date for the site walk? While everyone's pulling up their calendars, I'm anticipating the commission's going to want to see the soil scientists at the May 11th meeting to present.
This Commissioner Papantonis, if you're looking to do it next week, I could do it any day but Wednesday.
That's the 19th.
That's today I cannot do it.
Could you?
Can the homeowner do evenings, weekday evenings?
I mean, it depends. Right. So I work for the National Hockey League. I'm waiting for the playoff schedule. We get that probably this weekend. I'm not sure what my days are going to be next week, but I can make it work. You guys just tell me what day and I'll move my stuff around.
How's the 25th, which is the following Tuesday?
I can make anything work.
Good for me.
For me, it depends on the time. I might have to go to a 7:30 meeting. I'm not sure yet. So if it's like around 6, I would be able to do that, or like 5 o'clock.
Let's say earlier.
5 o'clock would be ideal for me. 5 o'clock or sooner.
5 would be fine for me.
5 o'clock on the 25th? Works?
Yeah.
Works for me.
Great.
5 p.m. April 25th.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Jamie, do we normally send a letter out giving the kind of a summary of where we're at, both for the site walk as well as the mitigation plan and all that?
So I can send I'll send an email to the homeowner, and I can CC Matt Davison on it, and attach the agenda send the agenda once it's ready for the site walk, confirming time. Yeah, email okay?
Oh, yeah. I didn't mean to misspeak with letter. Anything more on CC 13-1101? Okay, I guess we'll go back then to Inland Wetland 230404, 117 Flax Mill Road, in-ground swimming pool and patio. And I think material was sent out.
Yes.
Correct.
So hopefully commissioners received this either today or yesterday. Looking to put in a proposed pool with patio. There are a couple of things that I've already talked with the homeowner about, but I told him to hold off on revising his site plan until the meeting. So that way, if the commission had any additional comments, they could be addressed at the same time rather than going back for 2 revisions. So if you look at the site plan, you'll see that it has a 50-foot wetland setback line. It should be a 100-foot upland review area. There are no inland wetland setbacks per se. There's no erosion controls shown on the site plan, so that should be added. We also talked about adding the stockpiling location, which the homeowner indicated would be approximately in this location, I believe. Access would be through where this driveway is for the most part. What else did I say? One question I had for the commission is the new wetland delineation is on the survey, but the old wetland delineation is not. Is it important that both wetland delineations are shown on the survey, or are you satisfied with the latest information?
Can you clarify for me when you say the old wetland delineation is not on the map, but the new one is?
So the 2004 wetland delineation that we had from before the violation.
Yeah,
I don't know that it's necessary, but I know that the commission's requested it in the past.
well, because so using this would codify this as the new wetland line, but what's not being requested is a revision to the wetland map, right?
At this time, no. So in the time that I've been working with the Inland Wetland Commission, we have not had a separate map amendment application. Anytime that there's been an adjustment to a wetland line as part of an application, it's just been considered part of the application. So I don't know if this is different in the sense that there was direct wetland impact that caused the wetland to change rather than natural change.
Well, but I don't think that those amendments were not very substantially different from the preceding map. If we're looking at a wholesale change to where the wetland line is, and what this map would do would codify that. I would have concerns. I need to think about it, but I would have some concerns with just erasing that existing wetland line essentially off of what would be our town maps. I don't know. I need to think about it. Yeah, I need a minute. I would not, at this point, I would not say that you can just use those lines. I would want to see the previous existing or wetland lines. I mean, did he totally did he do a wetland delineation?
Yes. So this wetland line that you're seeing on the site plan is a new delineation that Matt Davison did within the last month or so.
This is John Sewell, the homeowner. He did it on April 5th.
This is Commissioner Begeman. I don't know if anyone remembers when we were looking at that school, I think it was a school that had grass all around it that was once wetlands, inland wetlands. And I don't remember if we had the old lines and the new ones on it, but that would be something to take a look at probably.
That was a very informal, this town property. It was a new wetland investigation done by a soil scientist. There was no updated map.
This is Commissioner Boda. I would say for the sake of caution, I would include those. I need to think about it and look back at some of our guidance from the state, and this is not the moment to do that. But I need to look at that stuff first. And the most conservative thing to do would be to just have put in a historic line, and then we can, that won't hold them up if we end up saying, look, you don't actually need that. But it would be better to put it in and be able to remove it than for that to be a sticking point later.
Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, I just need to look at some of the guidance from the state and the legal updates and whatnot.
So my kind of response to that is I think that it, for documentation purposes, could be a good idea to have both wetland lines shown on the plan. That way it's clear what the wetland line was, the consideration relative to the enforcement order, what the commission may ultimately approve as a revised wetland line. There is a formal wetland map amendment process, which we have not really used, like I said, in the last 8 years. That formal wetland map process requires a public hearing, filing in the town clerk's office. So the way we've kind of been getting around that is we've been maintaining an informal wetland map, which we've been updating as the commission approves modified wetland delineations. So would it be fair to say that you're comfortable moving forward with having both wetland lines shown on here? I'll send the engineer the list of the other modifications the commission wants to the site plan and the reference map with the old delineation on it. So it's just a matter of him adding it to the site plan.
Yeah, this is Commissioner Boda, and he can reference it as the 2013 wetland line, something to denote the distinction between is, the 2023 line and the 2013 line.
Actually 2004 line, but yes. Okay.
This is Commissioner Bassman. By the way, when I sit on a state in the wetland conservation group, and hardly anybody files that process that Jamie talked about, because it's a cumbersome process. It takes time away from the day-to-day, and people don't want to invest the time in something that they can denote as informal and get kind of the same intelligence without having to go through that formal recognition process.
Yeah, and back in 2016, when we were possibly going to get new model regs, they were also looking at trying to promote a revision to the state statutes to modify the map amendment regulation process to make it a little bit more all around user friendly. And those things kind of just got tabled and never moved forward. So I would just say it sounds like what we're doing would be consistent with recent practice. If we're looking to change it, we should just document what that is for moving forward to make sure that we are treating all applications uniform and fair. So we will have them add the old wetland line in addition to the silt fence, the revised 100-foot upland review area, and stockpiling location. Is it important to the commission that the pool enclosure fence is added to the site plan, or are you okay with me reviewing that when the building application is submitted to make sure that there's no issues with it? It's pretty minor activity, and it's usually, I would imagine it would be above the top of the slope. So
Yeah, I'm okay with your review, Jamie. Do we know what kind of filter system the pool uses?
I'm not sure. I can't see.
Sorry, John Sula, homeowner. Dave said the one. It's the environmentally safe one. I know I'm paying extra money for it.
Cartridge filter?
Yeah, I think that's the one, right?
Okay. I'll follow up with that in addition to the comments regarding the enforcement. Okay. And then I guess the last kind of question I had pre-noted out here is, does the commission want the mitigation areas to be shown on the site plan? And if so, should it be shown on relative to the application or relative to the enforcement, or
Why not both?
or both?
Well, I don't know. So this is Commissioner Boda. I think that the application is separate. I don't think that the pool application, unlike so many of our applications that happen at the same time as a cease and correct, these two things are not linked. I mean, Jamie, you said that in the beginning, and I was like, that's weird. I don't understand that. But these two things are not linked, and so I don't know why we would pair the two of them. They're not actually tied together.
Yeah, so I think the only reason why I asked is what I was ultimately asking is, do you want the mitigation shown spatially on the site plan? And at which point, if you wanted, we could have them call out the fact that that activity is separate and is part of the violation, not part of the application. Or I don't know, it might be sufficient to just have the soil scientist take a copy of the site plan and sketch, this is where we're doing this and this is where we're doing that, which the commission has accepted in the past as well. And then that way it kind of keeps the files separate.
That sounds fine.
I don't know. This is Mr. Bassman. My feeling is if we have a formal site plan, an activity associated with correcting a cease and correct, that we should show the mitigation area on that correction.
Okay.
That's it for 230404. Okay.
Homeowner still has his hand raised. Any additional comments, questions, or?
No, I think I might have hit that when I was trying to unmute. So I think we're good.
Double check.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
You got it. 22, CC correct, 220601, second NOV for 20 Huntington Drive, removal of trees and placement of debris. And you're going to, I guess, Jamie, give us a progress report on the restoration plan?
Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. To be honest with you, I do not really have an update. I did meet with the homeowner about moving the debris from the wetland before I went out for hand surgery. I'm pretty sure he started work. He's definitely done some work on site. Katie drove by the property. I had talked about fixing the erosion controls prior to start of work. That had not happened. I have not been back out. I did reach out to the homeowner for an update. I've not received one. My plan is to follow up with him next week. I've been sick this week, so I have not been able to truly follow up too much. But I do want to make sure I'm out there and that we have an update for the May meeting. And the original timeline was that he would have the plantings. So there's two areas for plantings, one along the wetland edge and another one to be developed for the slope area above the pond on an adjacent property. So the plantings along the wetland edge were to be planted by May 30th. So I would want to make sure he's on track to, if not have that done for the May 11th meeting, to certainly have it done for the May 30th May 30th date. Does the commission have any additional comments, concerns, timeline suggestions? Yeah. And you would agree that you want to see those plantings adjacent to the wetland by that agreed upon May 31st or set May 31st date.
Yeah. Okay, 2212, proceeds are correct, 221201, 21 Branford Road, construction without permits, we're continuing a just cause hearing from 12/8/22.
So I did receive an update from the property owner that the wetland scientist should be out either last week or the beginning of this week. So I had it on my calendar to follow up with him on Tuesday. I did try calling and the number was not in service. So I will be following up with him as well. I know he's got a lot of agencies he's dealing with regarding various violations on his property. So I am hoping to have that wetland delineation and an update for the May 11th meeting. Any comments, feedback, direction? All right.
Don't get sick. I guess that's what's going on here.
All right. Let's see if I can get my body to listen to you.
All right, D, notice of non-compliance, inland wetland 200301, 58 East Industrial Road, contractor yard. Non-compliance with erosion control plan and site layout.
So this came to my attention a while ago. I've met with the property owner and engineer on site along with zoning. The owner is looking to submit a revised plan. I was hoping it'd be ready for tonight's meeting. It was kind of a tight timeline. So they should have something for the May 11th meeting. I don't know if the commission wants me to follow up with, shall be submitted by, a week before May 11th, or further enforcement action may be taken. Essentially, I'll pull up real quick just so you guys can have a brief understanding of.
Where is 58 East Industrial?
You know where Rings End is?
Yeah, right at the end.
All the way at the end of the cul-de-sac on the left-hand side.
Yep. Okay.
So essentially the stormwater system on site has been roughed out. It's acting as a temporary sediment trap of sorts. It's not really compliant with how it was roughed out in the site plan. In the site plan, it was to have a standpipe and a pipe overflow to tie into the town, I believe, town drainage system, into the drainage system coming off the end of the East Industrial Road. Instead, they've installed a stone riprap swale overflow. I was concerned because that swale overflow looks to be at about the same elevation as the bottom of the temporary sediment trap, so I wasn't really sure how much water it would be retaining. I have since been out to the site after some storm events and seen that it does hold water, so it is functioning at some level. So I've asked the engineer to assess that functionality, provide a revised plan as to any modifications that should be made based on the current site conditions. And then if the applicant wants to keep that riprap swale ultimately as a final design feature, or even if it's going to be a temporary intermediate thing, I think it's significant enough that the commission needs to review that. So let's see. I think I did a quick markup, which might keep this short. All right, so this is the temporary sediment trap. So as you can see, it does hold water after a storm event. And then the erosion controls are essentially wood chips. They are holding up. He has installed a silt fence along the side of the site, but below the temporary sediment trap, it's just wood chips right now. So as part of that modification on the site plan that was approved, there was a retaining wall. I think that's something the commission needs to look at as well. So the modification of the slope below the retaining wall, and then as you can see, this is the pipe I was talking about where the overflow would tie into the existing drainage system. Instead, they have a riprap swale that comes all the way to the outlet of the existing stormwater system. So there is some stone placed within an actual wetland area. I don't think it's having a negative impact that requires immediate attention. There's a little bit of sediment buildup in the riprap swale, but I think that's coming a lot from stormwater runoff from the road. And this access drive that is shown here is not on the site. There's a pool water filling station over here. Whenever people use it, water leaks out of the system and it concentrates. So that has been addressed for the time being and isn't actively causing additional issues. But there's certainly things that I think the commission needs to look at sooner rather than later on site. So like I said, I'm hoping they'll have something for the May 11th meeting that the commission can look at as a modification to the existing permit. Any additional questions, concerns?
Not at this point.
I'll follow up telling them to have it ready for May 11th.
Thank you. All right, we're now into other business. Inland Wetland 191101, 1151 West Main Street, construction of bank and grocery store and associated improvements. 2 items, monitoring report and permit compliance. And number 2, bond return request. Dan, you've got some information regarding the monitoring report?
I need 1 minute, sorry. Gotta blow my nose.
Gesundheit.
Apologize, my cold is really catching up to me. All right, so I have received an as-built survey. I've received a letter that touches base on the rock slope in lieu of retaining wall on site, and I've received the second monitoring report for the first year of monitoring, which was due this past fall. The second monitoring report continues to identify the fact that there are that the wetland mitigation area is not functioning completely as anticipated or hoped for, particularly as it relates to hydrology and wetland creation. So there's a recommendation that potentially that area have a revised plan based on the existing conditions. So I don't know, do you guys want to dive into the monitoring compliance, or do you want to dive into the bond request first? Probably the monitoring compliance, even though that portion of the bond isn't being requested.
This is Commissioner Begelman. Just a question. You said that a retaining wall was replaced with a rock slope.
Yeah. So,
was that approved by anyone, or they just did it?
So
Jamie, do you want me to chime in here?
yeah, I'll let you take that one.
It's Vinny Giordano Construction. Yeah, the rock slopes were cut per the plan, and all signed off by the geotech and the civil engineer.
So from a wetland standpoint, towards the end of the project, they did come in with some modifications, which did show the rock cut in lieu of the retaining wall. It wasn't specifically addressed. I'm not sure how much of it really impacts. So from a wetland standpoint, the concern would be the stability of that rock cut, because at the base of that rock cut is a catch swale, but it's also a drainage swale, and it does feed into the drainage system. So it could possibly impact that drainage system. So from a wetland standpoint, making sure that that slope is stable, it would be the main concern. We did receive a letter, and it basically identified that at the time there doesn't seem to be any immediate concerns, and it did recommend continued ongoing monitoring and clean out as needed to prevent any accumulation of any material. I know that planning and zoning has not approved the change. However, it sounds like there are routes to have it approved. So that will be something the owner, I think, still has to do. But yeah, so that's why we have the rock slope letter. It's kind of driven by planning and zoning, but also I did observe some spots where there was some material that was coming off of the rock slope. There's some areas where it's slightly less solid than others, I guess. It doesn't look like there's anything catastrophic, and the site has been complete for about a year now, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's been over a year.
So, I mean, it's stood, that amount of time. And it's not like it's a really high rock slope and there's no traffic of people going through that area or anything. So the only concern would be it accumulating within the stormwater system. Does that answer your question?
As a follow-up to Commissioner Begelman's question, when we issued the permit, was the wall part of that permit or the rock?
There was a retaining wall proposed as part of the original application that was approved.
And you said that there was a modification. Do we have a written document that is now part of that file that shows the change?
So the modification plan, so there was a couple of modifications that were approved, including a slight change in the pad elevation, and with the access route to get to the back mitigation area for maintenance purposes, and also to get for the railroad access. So in the modifications that have been approved, it has shown the rock slope in lieu of the retaining wall. So I don't know that the commission specifically addressed the change, but it wasn't flagged at the time of.
But it was part of the approved modification.
It is shown on the approved modified plan. So, I don't know if the commission has any further concerns regarding that, or I guess my recommendation, jumping ahead, should the commission have any concerns regarding the rock slope, might be to hold on to the silt sacks for those catch basins. But I mean, at this point, it's been stable for over a year. I do think that it does warrant continued monitoring because it isn't 100% stable. And it might be that down the road, there's something the property owner has to do, but I think at the time it's probably okay. So kind of hearing silence, I'm going to move on to erosion controls first. So there has been a request for the erosion control portion of the bond to be returned. Most of the site is pretty stable. I think the two areas of concern I would have would be the mitigation area, which might need to have additional work done in it based on the mitigation reports we've received so far. And then adjacent to Watercourse 1, which is the kind of ponded wetland area at the top of the rock cut that was partially taken away with the excavation. There was an area that was to be seeded with a conservation seed mix. It's a mix of vegetation and mostly stone. So it's not an active erosion concern, but it's also not what the route plan showed as its final condition. So I don't know if the commission wants to require that vegetation establishment, if they're okay with possibly considering a modification or somewhere in the middle, possibly as part of the modification to the approved and existing restoration plan, if maybe keeping that drier wetland creation area as is and modifying plantings there, maybe supplementing some of that area adjacent to Watercourse 1 with some plantings to help separate the kind of stone disturbed area from the wetland area. I did take some pictures today. Unfortunately, I accidentally deleted half of them. So I only have one picture of that area that I'm talking about. But let me pull them up.
Commissioner Bassman, Jamie, you made in your opening comments that the mitigation area is not performing as designed. Do you have a sense of, is it 50%? Is it 80%? What's your sense?
Let me jump over to that after I just quickly show you the pictures to wrap up on site stabilization, because I think that's a quick thing we can get out of the way, and then we can dive into the thing that's kind of going to be ongoing. So pretty well established. There are some bare areas, but I don't really have any overall concerns. What you're looking at here is wood chips from the biodegradable silt sock. So this isn't loose dirt. It's material that will continue to decompose. Some of these plantings are a little bit suspended, but they seem to be holding up. No further erosion from what I've observed from when they were planted last, since they were looking for their kind of closing out and getting the stores open. There is some of this matting material, and Giordano, maybe you can, is this biodegradable or is this something that should be pulled up?
Yeah, no, that's biodegradable.
Okay. I wasn't sure because of the color.
Yeah, no, that it's biodegradable. And we also have our landscaper scheduled for next week come out and reshoot all the bare spots. Ray coordinated that with them already.
Okay. So this is at the top. This fence is above the rock cut. This is Watercourse 1. You can see the, again, silt sock starting to slightly biodegrade, and then the wetland area is here, and you can kind of see the silt sock on the other side as well. So it's this area beyond the Watercourse 1 that, unfortunately, I don't have a better picture of because I accidentally deleted them, where it's kind of a mix of stone and vegetation. So I don't know, maybe this area is going to get reshot as well, although it's, like I said, stone and vegetation. I'm not sure how much vegetation would establish without having some topsoil placed there. So that's kind of the site stability comments I have. And then regarding wetlands, creation monitoring, I'm going to jump to a picture. So this is from the latest monitoring report. And this is the area that the soil scientist has kind of identified as being area of deficient soil and hydrology. So that part hasn't really taken on wetland characteristics. Part of the reason why the commission has a 2-to-1 mitigation requirement is because mitigation isn't always as successful as we would like it to be. So let me jump up to the recommendations. The following is a potential option for consideration to address plant mortality and colonization by invasive species. So because it's not having those wetland characteristics, a lot of the plugs that were planted there haven't taken well. And in lieu, the invasives are really thriving in that area. I will take a quick aside to say that the first mitigation report at the beginning of the season required an invasive species management plan, which I understand that they've contracted all habitats to create, but is not ready yet. So that is in the works. And my question for the commission would be, is that something that the commission wants to review prior to implementation? Is it something that staff can review so that they can get started as soon as possible? Or do you want to have it submitted for review at the May 11th meeting? And then the recommendation here for the kind of the rest of the issues is herbicide invasives throughout 2023 growing season, followed by fall planting. Planting could be of woody species, shrubs, and possibly trees to discourage invasive mugwort. Treatments likely need to continue for several years afterwards. In this option, plantings would need to be adjusted to reflect predominantly upland hydrology. So basically, it would be coming up with a revised planting plan for this area identified on the site plan.
Do we have a sense of why a large area like that didn't take hold? Is it lack of hydrology? Is it something that wasn't considered when the plan was developed? Just so we don't repeat the same thing again.
It could be with the micro topo. It could have to do with the soil that was brought in, or whether it was that area didn't receive sufficient wetland soil mix. I'm not really sure. I did read this report, but I honestly read it last week and I've not reread it this week. So I'm not sure if Matt dives into that.
I guess looking at the kind of larger picture, how do we learn from these experiences? If we just come away with more questions than answers when something fails.
Yeah, so I think part of it is trying to, and maybe I can take another look at this. And if that information is not already in this report, we can ask the soil scientist to speak to that a little bit more for further consideration. And I think part of it is acknowledging that one thing the commission could require is more documentation along the way. Like a report at time of wetland creation from a specific professional that, was to be involved in that process. And then the other part of it is having these corrective actions. So the question, I guess, for the commission, aside from figuring out, how to apply this with future practice, but specifically to this site would be, does that wetland recreation area need to be restored to what was originally approved, or is the commission open to a modified plan for that area? And I'm going to pause and let the commission talk.
Commissioner Bassett, what would be the difference between a modified plan and, the recreation, if you will, of the original plan?
So if you were to have them go in and do the original plan, and I can also let Giordano speak to this because they're the ones that would, they have experience with what would actually entail, but you would have to be bringing equipment back in. You'd be removing material. You'd be bringing in new material. It would be starting all over again. So you'd be freshly disturbing, stripping it back down and going back in, because in order to make it what it originally was proposed to be, you're going back down to the ground level. So I think the reason why it was suggested to kind of adjust to what the current conditions are is because you've got that trade-off of going in and having all of that ground disturbance again versus
without the confidence that it's going to result in a different.
Well, but this is Commissioner Boda, but the purpose of that was to replace wetlands that were taken, correct? That is the function of that area, is to replace wetlands that were filled?
It was part of the mitigation for the wetland impact. And I did not look up, I know that we have a 2-to-1 requirement. I didn't actually look up what this actual application did. As far as whether it was 2-to-1 or slightly more than 2-to-1.
I for one would be much more interested in having them get it to the function that was approved. It was approved it was accepted as a way to mitigate for wetland taking. And so if the function is for it to be a wetland, then that is their responsibility, is to make it a wetland and not to cut their losses and throw some upland plants in it.
Any commissioners have any?
Oh yeah, this is Commissioner Bassett. I concur. I mean, this is why we exist. And it's something like this, and obviously there was some concern at the time of this application from the public about the taking of the wetland and the recreation, so to speak. I think to the extent that we, stub our toe here and say, okay, well, we're going to do something else. It may not return the functionality that we took. I think then we're not doing what we're supposed to be doing.
Commissioner Papantonis, I concur.
This Commissioner Bradford, my concern is, though, with all of the tactical issues of how you do that, you bring in equipment and all that, I don't know what's going to be different so that we have a successful outcome this time, as opposed to just repeating a failure.
Well, I would say if the commission's looking to have the original plan re-implemented in that area, then probably you would want to have the soil scientist involved and the engineer involved to make sure that elevations are correct to, promote success, and that the right amount of material is being brought in. I don't know what the differences are in sub layers below that that soil being brought in for the wetland mitigation. I can't guarantee that if they go in there and redo it, that it's going to work. There's probably some things that could be done that would certainly increase its success in achieving the original goal, but
This Commissioner Papantonis, I remember reading in the report something about the severe drought last summer affecting the plant success rate.
Yeah, and that might have affected the establishment of the area as well, because I know the trees have suffered, the oak trees that were planted, and then a lot of the herbaceous growth didn't fully mature because of the drought conditions, and there's only so much you can do about that. The report doesn't exactly address whether the 85% success standard is met. And I think it's kind of hard to identify. At this point, I think all of the oak trees are still alive. I think a lot of them are struggling and not necessarily doing well, but they're all still alive and could recover and be perfectly fine. I think it's important this year that, maybe watering bags are used to supplement should we have more drought conditions on those trees. And then regarding the herbaceous growth, without it maturing, they can't be identified. So it's hard to establish a percent cover of the planted plugs too, and desirable native species. So, I mean, there's kind of a lot of moving targets with this. I think the focus point is that area of deficient soil and hydrology, because that's the part that is clearly least performing.
Do we have more business on this item, or is that?
So I guess we need to confirm the commission is looking to have that area kind of reworked to comply with the originally approved plan.
Jamie, can I just chime in for a quick second?
I'll let the chair answer that.
Go ahead.
I think that I understand the concern of the wetland perhaps not performing as anticipated. But Davidson provided this solution because of what he saw when he was out there. He was out there when we first started, when we began, and everything was approved. It's not like this was just done in the dark of night. All this was done per proper requirements, and Matt was out there and observed the installation. So I think what he's trying to do with this plan is achieve success. Okay, it may not be exactly what they intended when they designed it, but that's what he's looking to do, and what he's looking to provide the town and the Wetlands Commission here is a successful situation. You've got a lot of invasives that the prior property owner, they were not in our contract, so the prior property owner did not deal with, even though we suggested that he do so. So there's just a lot of different factors going on out there that, taking into the totality of it, I mean, it took a while for this report to come to be. And I think the whole point of it was to provide something that would be successful, and that would work, and that would be a benefit. And I think, as Jamie mentioned earlier, there's a reason why you guys do this 2-to-1. It's not an exact science, and sometimes hydrology and the different factors don't work the way they're designed. It just, unfortunately, is part of the process of this thing. So as much as all of us in all different workshops of life, how we look at things, we want it to be perfect. This is not a perfect situation. And I think that Matt provided a good plan that will succeed. I think going back in there, tearing that whole section apart, and I think what Jamie said is very true. The amount of disturbance that will create other issues that are not present now, and just create an ongoing issue here. Whereas what Davidson's proposing, I think, is a good, successful plan that can be achieved with minimal disturbance and give the commission a good product. So I think I would reconsider locking in on a real hard line on this thing.
But this is Commissioner Bassett, but the revised plan may not create the function that the wetland had before the project, and certainly even after the project, the plan that was to give certain functionality to that area, that was not met either. So, I guess how many steps back do you take before you throw up your hands and say, well, let's do something else?
Well, I'm not a wetland scientist. We just install, and we do what we can to get these things to go in as best we can. But I don't think that it was anyone's goal to go out there and fail. And I think the fact of the matter is that you're still going to achieve the workings, and you still have a huge area back there that is completely isolated, completely, to itself, a habitat that is going to work and going to work very well. You got to remember, you're building in an old quarry, right? That's all that place was. Right? When I was a little kid, that was a rock quarry. Okay. It wasn't any kind of pristine wetland. It wasn't any kind of pristine forest. It was a rock quarry. Okay. So I think it's also important to kind of keep in mind what you've created and what has been established back there is significantly improved from what's been there for the past 30 years. And what was there while it was a rock quarry. So I think that a little bit of perspective is important, and an understanding that the wetland scientist is looking at the current situation, looking at what he's got, and he feels as though this is the best outcome for success and for a positive outcome. And I think the plant selection that he's going to come up with is going to be a part of that. So I think it's, I know this project, I wasn't involved in this project from the very beginning. And I know it was a very contentious approval process, and I get it. But I think all in all, what you've got out there is a tremendous improvement for what's been there for the past 30 years. And I think that just a kind of a realization and understanding of we're looking to do the best that we can, and we are. Okay. And this area didn't quite take the way it should have. Okay. But we're going to come in. We've got a good plan with a good wetland scientist in a good position. And we're going to implement the plan, and it'll have success. Because that's what he's evaluated after looking at everything and looking at the situation and looking at what the environment is after it's grown in for a year. So that would be my suggestion to the commission.
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. So I do have a couple of comments. I do also just want to pull up real quick. I don't think the as-built extend. Do you know if there was ever an as-built done of the wetland creation area with elevations?
Again, that was not in our contract, so I don't know what the owner contract would be able to do, and that's why all this took so long. Is none of this part of this, even all this this part that we're doing right now, is not in the Giordano construction contract. We're doing it as a favor to the project and as a favor to the owner. But yes, we had to create it, and yes, we're standing behind it, and yes, we're we had to pull the bond, and so our bond money is associated with this thing. But again, like I said, the invasive species was not part of our contract. None of the stuff in the beginning, and all the as-builts was all by the owner.
So it is a bit of a weird situation. I don't know if the commissioner is aware, but there was one owner that submitted the application and did the development, and the property has since changed hands. So there are a bunch of different players, and so we're dealing with one player or at this exact moment. So I think for the commission's consideration, okay, so two things. One, I'm going to start with, do you think that the invasive species management plan can be ready for the commission to review at the May 11th meeting, Vincent?
Yes, we do expect that. Ray was talking with All Habitat last week, and I know they just needed a little bit of time. So yes, we're expecting it next week.
Okay. So yeah, if you can submit that as soon as possible, we can get it sent out to the commissioners. And then for the commission, I don't know if maybe it makes sense to kind of take a step back and maybe ask for some additional information for the soil scientist to maybe attend the May 11th meeting to discuss options. In the second report, the recommendations, it says the following is a potential option for consideration. So, I mean, it seems a little bit open-ended. I think that there are kinds of pros and cons to the two different options, and maybe there's a middle ground where they go in and do some micro topo changes to try and increase the hydrology in that area without changing the whole thing. So maybe, I don't know if it's the wetland scientist, the engineer, having both be involved, possibly if some modification to the originally approved plan is desired, to propose an alternative plan, but that should include actual information on changes from what was approved to what is proposed. And that should include topo changes. It should include planting changes. So right now it says a planting plan could be made. I would think the commission would probably want to see that planting plan, or at least a representative of that planting plan, understanding that, there could be some species changes based on what the field conditions are, but at least a planting plan that addresses the types of plants and numbers of plants, so that way the commission would be more comfortable in possibly considering that. Because right now it's kind of we can change the plan and there is no actual plan.
Yeah, I do think it was Matt Davidson's intent to be on this meeting, but he got stuck traveling. So that's why he's not here tonight. But yes, I think that he can be available for the next meeting. And yes, he can put together a planting plan that is a good, successful one that has a good probability of success. So yes, I do think that's reasonable.
So, just speaking for myself, this is Commissioner Boda. We've been on this topic for a long time, and it was a short agenda, so there was definitely a hope of not being here till 10 o'clock again. So I think the store is the store. It's functioning as a store. The bank is a bank. It's functioning as a bank. The driveway is a driveway. It's functioning as a driveway. You can have Matt Davidson come in and make a presentation. He can present whatever. I mean, like, that's up to you as the property owner or the person doing the work that has been contracted by the property owner. I would like to see the function that was submitted in the application and approved, that is the function that should be done by that particular part of the property. That's what I'll be looking for. You can certainly present whatever you like, but that is what I will be looking for when we hear from Matt.
Commissioner Papantonis, Jamie, is there a way to go back and look at the plan that we had approved? Where do we find it?
I believe it is in the Dropbox.
I didn't see it. I must have missed it, but
it's possible that we, let me see.
You gotta go back. You didn't provide that in the current information.
It looks like it is not in the Dropbox. I can pull it up and I can add it to the Dropbox for future reference for the next meeting. Or I can just add it for the next meeting.
Thank you. I'd like to take a look at it.
We'll update that tomorrow. Do you want to look at it right now?
Well, this Commissioner Papantonis, if we're tabling this till next month, I can wait and look at it again. But
we'll send an email out to the commissioners once it's been updated. So if it for some reason doesn't get updated until Monday, we'll let you know.
Commissioner Barron, I guess with the modifications, James.
Sorry, was somebody saying something?
Yeah, I said I think it's probably important to put in the modifications as well.
Okay.
Did we completely tackle the bond return request, or is that still open?
I would say we've tackled the site compliance portion. So at this time, they're requesting a return of the bond relative to the erosion control portion of the bond. They are accepting and understanding of the fact that the mitigation area is still ongoing. So I don't know if the commission would like to proceed with that erosion control bond request reduction at this time, or table that to the discussion that will be held at the May 11th meeting. I do think the commission would want to retain some of the erosion controls relative to that mitigation area and whatever activities ultimately have to go on in there. I do think, so I believe that the erosion control bond is approximately $50,591. I do think it would be reasonable and appropriate to consider a reduction of a fair portion of that, but I don't know if the commission would like to proceed with that this time, or like I said, table it till next meeting.
Jamie, is there a way to make more, this is Commissioner Boda, is there a way to make more concrete the quantity that would be held back for the mitigation area versus the quantity that would be released? Perhaps between now and the May meeting, that could be made more concrete, and then we can address that instead of kind of making up a number on the spot and
I did
rather arbitrary.
I did make an approximate estimate of erosion controls, but I have to admit it was approximate, and I just quickly sketched it out. So I don't know if that's what you're looking for, or if you're looking for something more formal from the engineer. And I think you could always round it up a little bit to feel comfortable that you've retained enough, but still provide some relief to the bondholder. As you could always consider further reduction.
This is Commissioner Bassman. My concern is we ought to have a stated process when it comes to bond returns on how we calculate it, as opposed to treating each one on an individual basis where the conditions may be different in terms of how we approach it. So, to the extent that we're going to use, square feet to determine, the erosion, and if the bond was kind of a combined thing in the beginning, maybe we ought to revisit that. So rather than take an approximation, I think let's think about the process and then fit this into that process as opposed to the other way around.
So the process when a bond estimate is submitted, that everything's itemized, and for erosion controls, that would be like number of silt sacks. It would be linear feet of silt fence. So when I estimated it based on the silt fence that should be in place for the areas of potential concern. I did kind of,
So we have a process.
We do, yes. Yeah.
This is Commissioner Begemon. If the other commissioners are willing to look at it and see if it suffices in our estimation, or if not, it's hard to just to
Would you like me to pull up the document that I have prepared? Okay.
Please.
All right, so I just I drafted this early on when the request was kind of first submitted, and I did some minor modifications to it after going out to the site recently. So this base document is the bond estimate that was submitted, and the green writing is kind of my superimposed comments, thoughts for the commission. So on file for this project, there is a $44,650 surety bond and a $44,632 cash bond. Bond was split into phase 1, phase 2. That doesn't really matter to our considerations right now, but kind of helps with how everything is set up. So the erosion controls is split into 2 phases. I think it would be fair to release the the entry tracking pad, because clearly everything is paved, and the access drive to the back is all crushed stone. So it's done. There's no concern with that. So right there, that would be itemized $3,792 to be released. A dewatering bag, that's something the commission might want to hold on to, not knowing what's going to happen with the mitigation area. Silt sack, I have release/partial release in case the commission was concerned relative to the rock slope. Another comment I have regarding those catch basins is that they're at a higher elevation than the bottom of the swale. So there would have to be some standing water to kind of, I guess, get to the point where the top of that catch basin is in jeopardy of having sedimentation issues. Again, we've got more silt fence and other erosion control, temporary sediment trap. Basically all the grading's done. If there's going to be any regrading in the wetland creation area, that wouldn't be applicable. Erosion control blanket, as you can see, that's pretty stable and it's in place still. Stone check dams, that's done. Temporary drainage swale is done. And then silt sack and silt fence is the same as above. And then restoration and enhancement in the monitoring reports, they are not asking for at this time. So, in summary, mitigation and monitoring reports, the bond of $38,673 should be held. Regarding consideration of erosion control bond, which in total is $50,591.24. Back in the fall, I had identified 3 areas of concern along Mill Creek, which I think at this point is pretty stable, in knowing that they're going to touch up any of the areas that need seeding. I'm not sure if the commission feels the need to retain that, but I kind of came up with a linear foot estimate. So basically, it's $5 per linear feet. So the 1,250 would be my estimate for that area. Watercourse 1, this would be the area where the seed mix has not fully established for the site plan. And then the wetland mitigation area, I estimated 3,000. Now, I will admit on the wetland mitigation area, I didn't take the full erosion control area as identified on the site plan. In part because the silt fence was shown in areas where I wouldn't foresee there needing to be silt fence at this point. So that number could be a little bit different, and that would maybe lend to, especially if the commission's not sure exactly what the mitigation activities look like, maybe rounding up a little bit should you want to reduce the bond, but still make sure you have plenty of funds. The dewatering bag was $250, and then again for the rock cut, the silt sacks would be $800. So it's approximately $7,000 if you add it all up. Not saying that all of it necessarily would be things the commission would want to retain. And if the commission is going to reduce the bond, it needs to be determined whether you're reducing the cash bond or the surety bond or some mix of the two.
Well, I think you certainly addressed the issue, as Commissioner Bassman. You certainly addressed the issue of how we determine the bond and how much might be retained versus released. I guess in your green area here, Mill Creek, you say mostly established. So I assume when you say mostly stabilized, essentially wouldn't cry out to be retained. That could be released, I assume.
Yeah, there's some bare spots, but I haven't seen any erosion occurring in those areas. And overall, it's got pretty good establishment. I would certainly recommend, as has already been presented, that those areas be reseeded. And it sounds like it's scheduled for next week. And there is still it's starting to decompose, but there is still the existing silt sock there to provide some level of protection while those areas are filling in.
What this is Commissioner Bodo. If you scroll up, you have a handful of items. You've separated the items into like not yet, maybe, and should be removed or should be released. Release seems appropriate. Release seems appropriate, right? So what if we did those? Release seems appropriate because like the entry tracking pad, obviously, like we didn't need that, right? What if we did those tonight? We can take that dollar amount and add it up, do 50 cash, 50 surety, and then for the next meeting, some of those maybes that need to be reworked, you'll have time to rework them. And what we don't need, then at that May 11th meeting, again, we can release the remaining part, again, 50 cash, 50 surety. I'm just trying to think about an expedient way to do this because we still have other items to go and it feels fair and doable in a reasonable amount of time.
This Commissioner Begeman, I agree with that approach.
All right, so we're looking at 3792 plus 6344 plus 747. Does somebody else want to maybe do this math as well to make sure? All right, so I think I came up with $19,410.60 for those items that were completely recommended for release. I mean, certainly a lot of these other items could be greatly reduced, but for the sake of simplicity and having some progress on this request that's been on the docket, suppose that's one way.
What dollar amount did you say?
$19,410.60.
Can you scroll down? Is there more in?
And there's no further recommendations for release below that.
Okay.
I might have.
Yeah, can you scroll back up? Is it just that section under ENS?
It's ENS phase 1 and 2. So there's the 3,792 for the entry.
That might have been the dollar amount I was missing. You went too fast. Go back. You said to double check. I was trying to double check.
3,792. If we're just doing full release ones.
92. Okay.
And then $770.64 for the swale, $6,344 for the stone check dams, $7,474.60 for the erosion control blanket, and $1,800 for the temporary sediment trap.
David, sorry.
You said 19?
I got 20,181.24.
Me too. Okay, me too.
Okay. I didn't think I did it right.
So did I.
Calculator.
That's the winning number.
21,000.
No, 20.
No.
20,000.
20,000.
One person.
20,181.24.
I obviously did a wrong line to. Yep, I can see.
So that would be 10,000.
Swale.
$90.62.
Wait a minute. No.
For each the surety and the cash.
Oh, okay. So you want to do a split cash surety reduction?
That's easy. Sorry, that was odd. Yeah, I mean, that makes sense, doesn't it?
It's up for the commission to decide. I don't know if the commission wants to open it up.
I'm just asking, this is Katie. I'm just asking logistically, would it make sense to reduce the surety at this point? Because if we're going to return more money next month, isn't that going to be confusing paperwork wise? Wouldn't it just make more sense to do one or the other right now?
I think that's a fair point.
because I just,
the surety, they'd probably wait and see what happened before submitting paperwork to the surety company.
right. That's what I'm saying, because it doesn't make sense to have to do it twice within a month, essentially.
Yeah. So in the revised regulations for bonds, there's a stress on having cash for erosion controls, because erosion controls are the things the commission's going to want to get in and fix ASAP. I think it's up to the commission.
This Commissioner Bassel, we return bonds, not frequently and even infrequently, but have we split it normally, or is every one of these a debate?
I think so. This is kind of a new issue, because until 2017, all bonds had to be 100% cash. So there was no decision to be made. It was all cash. It was cash or cash.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think doing the surety bond, doing it all surety bond would be fine. I was thinking that the property owner, the bondholder, would prefer to have some of that cash back. But
maybe
which is why I thought to split it, because in this way we still have enough cash. I don't want to do it all back in cash, because then we've sort of tipped the scales a bit. But I wouldn't be opposed to doing it all surety.
Well, I don't. Do we want to see if the bondholder has a request, and then the commission can consider that? I mean, alternatively, I don't know. Maybe they're just as happy to wait until next month. I don't know. That way, they have one final decision.
I think as long as I feel like we've been on this item for like an hour. So, I think we can hear from them, but if they could be quick and we can be decisive, that would be really helpful.
Just go with the 50-50, the cash and the surety, and be done with it. That's all.
That makes that simple.
Thank you.
Okay, so reduce the bond by $20,181.24, with half of that to be reduced from the cash portion and half of that to be reduced from the surety. Would a commissioner like to make a motion to that effect, or?
I will make a motion that we reduce the bond for inland wetland 20.07.01 by $20,181.24, half of which is to be surety, half of which is to be bond, so that each half is $10,090.62.
This is Commissioner Bassman. Commissioner Boda, what inland wetland number did you quote?
20.07.01. It's what's on the top of the bond estimate. Is that the wrong number? Hold on.
I think. Weren't we 191101?
191101.
Revised to inland wetland 19.11.01.
This Commissioner Beck second that motion.
Any further discussion? Yes, we need a roll call on this one, Jamie.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Begerman,
Commissioner Begman, aye.
Commissioner Boda,
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Papatonis,
Commissioner Papatonis, aye.
Commissioner Ormond,
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
Commissioner Basserman, aye. And can we put the other screen up if you would? I want to make sure I get everybody. I think I got everybody. Did I get Commissioner Begerman? You did, okay. Commissioner Basserman. Any nothing else on 191101, correct? All right.
Continue the review of the status till next month.
All right. Inland Wetland 210802, 61 and 65 to 99 Bourbon Drive, conversion of existing building to age-restricted multifamily residential development. Permit modification request.
So I believe we have somebody, if they haven't left, we do. So just a quick synopsis. There are some minor modifications to the site plan, which I don't think the commission needs to dive into, with the exception of the WPCA is requiring that the sanitary sewer connection line be replaced, which does involve 2 linear feet of pipe within a wetland area. So I can pull up the site plan, and or if Richie would like to screen share, let me know and I can open it up for you to screen share.
I'll be happy to screen share if you don't mind. That maybe help things move along.
Sure, absolutely. Let me just, you should be good.
Sure, let me just get to it here.
While he's pulling it up, I will mention, as there is additional activity within a wetland area, theoretically there's additional application fee. However, they did request an application fee when the application was first for review, application fee reduction, which was not granted by the commission. But I would like to point out that all direct wetland impact is improvements that they're proposing that were either requested by the Inland Wetland Commission or by the WPCA. So I figured, given the fact that it's a replacement request to help prevent infiltration of sewage, it was something the commission would like to see, and it was fair to consider as a modification to the existing permit.
Thanks, Jamie. My name is Todd Ritchie, a professional engineer with SLR Consulting. We came before you, we're representing 61 Bourbon Associates, and this is the 61 Bourbon Drive project that of the existing building has been previously approved to be repurposed into housing units. As part of that process, later in the town's review process, we did have to go before WPCA. And at that time, we had to investigate the existing, they required us to look into and investigate the existing sanitary sewer service from the building. The existing sewer lines are within the wetlands on 6599 Bourbon Drive next door. They basically go underneath in and out of wetlands throughout the site. If you're not familiar, there's a pump station, sanitary pump station on that site, one of the town's pump stations. So certainly the sewer for this part of the town goes to that station and gets pumped to a different location, and that force main pump line, as well as another gravity line from the south side, comes into that, joins into that station on 6599. But for this particular project, 61, this sanitary line is pre-existing, as this parcel was developed in conjunction with the 6599 address, because this was the church and this was the, I guess you would call that the old monastery, the convent or the retirement home for clergy. So this was brought over onto this property, and this is the sanitary line as we've identified it right here. It does have 2 lines that come out of the building, join into a manhole. and then it discharges into a manhole. And as Jamie mentioned, this is the wetland line right here, and it enters the wetlands where the manhole exists today, and it joins into that manhole. So this line was made out of cast iron back in the day, not the best of materials for long term. Certainly corrodes, and the type of material that the WPC doesn't want to see continue to be used or be in use. So we'll be replacing this with standard 6-inch PVC, plastic pipe, which is sewer standard now, and certainly long lasting and resilient. In order to accomplish this, we are obviously within the regulated area, which is the 100-foot line here. And we're also within, as Jamie mentioned, a couple of feet of wetlands here to replace the pipe that actually goes over this wetland line right here to the manhole right here. I'm going to pop to the next drawing, and these are this drawing set, just so you know, this is the actual permit set for the from the planning office that was signed off on for the building permit. This can obviously change if you have any additional input or requirements as part of your approval. We do show this dotted line, which would be the limit of disturbance in the silt barrier, a silt fence. I believe we show, I have to check the detail, but usually it's a silt fence backed by, it's been a while, sorry. I'll get back to that, sorry. It's usually a silt fence backed by hay bales, or just a silt fence itself, or any type of barrier that you would want in the fact that we're actually going into wetlands. This is on the sort of on the edge or fringe of a drainage channel that comes from a culvert underneath Bourbon Drive, and the drainage continues through 6599. This is the sort of park area that's being preserved. As you can see, there's a couple trees that are over top of this line. That's not, it's something that would be replaced in those locations, at least, because they shouldn't have been there to begin with, over top of the utility. So it will be replaced in the same location. This dotted line is brought in this manner, and I guess it's within, I guess that I measured, there's about 500 square feet of actual outline with this dotted line within wetlands. The reason for that is they do have to, for doing this work, they do have to have access to the manhole, at least with people, and keep this barrier back, so they can have proper access. Confined space entry requires tripod and that type of equipment. We don't want to have them tripping over the silt fence and that sort of thing. It doesn't mean this is going to be all disturbed. The disturbance is going to be limited to a trench width up to the manhole itself, and with a trench box. So this is just a foot and workers area here, and foot traffic, and the actual direct impact or excavation will take place in a trench, like about 4 or 5 feet wide along this line up to the manhole itself. I think that's, I don't know if you had any other outstanding items, Jamie, on some of the lists that you sent ahead of time. That's basically all I have. It's just complying with the requirement of the WPCA.
So for the commission, comments that I had was a temporary disturbance within the wetland should be minimized. That was kind of just explained. And then other conditions that I think the commission might want to consider should you decide to approve the modification would be any vegetation removed from the wetland/bank shall be replaced in kind to stabilize and restore the area. If there's a concern regarding replacement vegetation interfering with the sewer line, duly authorized agent may approve alternative. And that an original copy of the revised site plan should be submitted for the file. We have a digital copy, but no paper copy.
Mr. Bassam, it seems pretty straightforward. As you indicated, Jamie, these are certainly things that could enhance or help at least the wetland and the community with the replacement of the pipe. Seems to me that a modification to the existing permit is an appropriate vehicle for this project. Anybody feel differently?
Not to rush the commission, but it would require a motion.
Fast, when I make a motion that on 210802, the conversion of an existing building to age-restricted multifamily residential developed it in concert with concerns from WPCA and the removal of an existing pipe and replacing with new pipe, that a modification to the existing permit is an appropriate vehicle for this project to commence.
Commissioner Papantonis, second.
Any other comments from the commission?
This is Commissioner Boda. Did you want to incorporate? So Jamie had made a couple of recommendations, which included the agent to
Move any modification.
well, yeah, for the plantings, because it's a sewer line, you can't necessarily plant, but to I don't remember the wording that she used.
Yeah, I will look.
That's on the screen.
Motion to include the following conditions: that any temporary disturbance within the wetland should be minimized to the extent possible. Any vegetation removed from the wetland or the bank should be replaced in kind to stabilize and restore the area. And if there is a concern with replacement vegetation interfering with the sewer line, that the duly authorized agent may approve an alternative. And an original paper copy of the site plan should be submitted for inland wetland files. Do I have a second on that modification?
Commissioner Papantonis, the second the modification.
Commissioner Begeman, just a question on the motion. This includes the standard conditions, and I mean, when it's a modification, those previous conditions and provisions are already there. Is that correct?
Correct. All of the existing conditions would still remain in place.
Thank you.
Not a bad thing to clarify.
Any other commission questions, comments? Okay, I guess let's take a roll call vote. Commissioner Begeman.
Commissioner Begeman, aye.
Commissioner Boda.
Commissioner Boda, aye.
Commissioner Papantonis.
Commissioner Papantonis, aye.
Commissioner Ormond.
Commissioner Ormrod, aye.
Commissioner Basson, aye. I think that's everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Yep. Inland Wetland 434 East Main, 25,000 square foot office building. Another bond reduction request. What's for this one, James?
So Jamie Frederick and the wetland agent. This is a site that was approved for office building. Basic site work has started. Retaining wall has been completed. And is kind of in a standstill situation a little bit while they reassess use and potential tenant. So I believe that essentially what they're requesting a bond reduction of the erosion control portion of the bond. I think this is a little unique because the site is not in a final stage of compliance with the approved site plan. The commission did have some preliminary discussions with the applicant permit holder previously, and had kind of discussed having kind of an interim plan with that maybe the commission could consider relative to a possible bond reduction, and whether that bond reduction is temporary or permanent would depend upon what that phase looks like and what completing that project to completion would look like. Excuse me. So we've received the request for the reduction of the bond for erosion controls. There's also a bond for mitigation and monitoring, which is still ongoing and not requested at this time. We've received a sketch of a plan. So let me see if I can. I did not. Okay. I believe the permit holder is present and can give more details, but I'll screen share the plan that was received, and I'll just comment that the site is currently in a pretty stable condition, but there's certainly additional work that needs to occur, and I would think that it's not clear to me that the erosion control plan is completely phased out for the rest of the project, but it does seem like there could be this interim type phase possibly for consideration. So I'll start off with a couple pictures of what it looked like when I went out to the site on April 4th. So there's actually 2 rows of silt fence. You can't see the one closer to the retaining wall. For the most part, below the retaining wall is pretty well vegetated. And then on the slope immediately above the retaining wall, I believe that they have some erosion control blanket there. And then also it's started to fill in with some vegetation. And then along the length behind this kind of berm, there's a diversion swale, which diverts stormwater to temporary sediment trap on either side of the site. And then majority of the pad is kind of covered in stone at this point. There is a stockpile of topsoil, dirt, which is kind of vegetated for the most part. And then there's the temporary sediment trap where the underground stormwater system is ultimately proposed. So here's the retaining wall, silt fence, pretty well vegetated. You might be able to see some flags down here for some of the mitigation plantings. Here you can see there's some damage to the silt fence. It's not really needed at this time though. So just kind of give you an idea of what the stability of the site currently looks like. This is the temporary sediment trap area. And this is the area where the activity got closest to the water course. This is the for the sanitary sewer work. And this is easement area for various utilities. Okay. And then I think it might make sense next to jump over to this plan that was received from the permit holder. Kind of identifying stockpiling, anti-tracking pad, diversion swale. I didn't get any itemization against the bond amount. I don't know if the commission is satisfied with the sketch or if you're looking for a phase plan from the project engineer for consideration of bond reduction. This came in on Friday towards the end of the day. I didn't have a chance to look at it because I was leaving for a site visit. And I've only been in the office Tuesday and Thursday this week. So I have not really spent a lot of time looking at this. I was hoping for some itemization. And again, I'm not sure if the commission's looking for a formal phased erosion control plan that maybe not only addresses the current need, but future need. So that way, if you're reducing the bond amount, but anticipate needing more bond once work starts back up, you know what that number is up front. So that way there's no further delay when they want to start work back up and everyone's on the same page and knows what needs to happen.
This is Commissioner Boda. I think that would be really helpful. I think it's really weird to release erosion controls. I understand that there are sections that are stable, but looking at a site that is, it's still got a stockpile in the middle and it's all open. And so it's a little weird. I don't remember doing something like that before, but I think having an itemization would be really helpful, so that we're not trying to do some arbitrary, capricious calculation here on the fly. We can know exactly which spots we're talking about and for how much.
This is Commissioner Bassett. I mean, we just minutes ago went through a very quantitative assessment for a bond, and here we don't have any of that. So it would seem to me that if we're going to be a commission that is concerned about, setting precedent and treating everyone fairly, etc., we need to go through the same exercise.
If I may say something, so the last time we met with this request, we discussed coming back to the commission once we have installed the stormwater system in the catch basins, because they were not, even though we had the diversion swale at the time, all the silt fences, we had a stone berm in front of the diversion swale, which we still have. Since then, at your request, your suggestion, come back after you install the stormwater system, which we did. We also made reference last time to the sewer lateral, both of which could have impacted the wetlands. The storm, less likely because it's all on top of the retaining wall slope has been vegetated, everything has been protected. We had the swale behind the stormwater system. That, in my mind, wasn't at risk for impacting the wetlands. The sewer lateral did go through the buffer area, not into the wetlands, but obviously that excavation could have impacted the wetlands. We accomplished both of those successfully. The only thing that's remaining in the wetlands area or in the buffer area, because the buffer is fully established at this point in time. There's no intrusion into the buffer that I've witnessed over the last 2 years out there, and I'm referring to 2 winters. The only thing that is remaining in the buffer area is the final connection of the sewer. We did put the full lateral in right to the sewer main, but the sewer authority does not want us to make the final connection until we have the final use. And that makes sense. So we've completed our work in the buffer area adjacent to the wetlands. It's been established. We have our mitigation plantings in there. They've been there for 2 years now. The retaining wall has been 100% complete for quite some time. The slope up above the retaining wall is in place. It's totally vegetated. And we have belts and suspenders, if you will, with the swale. With the swale that was originally called for on the sedimentation and erosion plan, I left it in place until we have, I thought that was good policy, until we have final use. The whole surface area up there that would comprise of any runoff is 100% aggregate, with the exception of one topsoil pile and one earth pile. The rest of the couple of piles that are there are aggregate. There's no, in my mind, we've accomplished proper sedimentation and erosion control measures. They're completed. and I'll admit they're completed in a temporary manner, but the wetlands are protected. And so as far as quantification, all those things exist. We have 520 feet of HDE pipe installed, 5 catch basins. We have 170 feet of sewer lateral installed. We have 1,200 plus feet of silt fence down in the buffer area, which I'm actually requesting that get removed now because there's no impact on the buffer area at this point in time. And not to mention the 580 feet of backup swale that's installed. All these items, and I also have a 1.25 inch check dam berm in front of that. So all these items that I'm mentioning now are protecting any possibility. Anything's possible, don't get me wrong, but any reasonable possibility of impact to the buffer or the wetlands. And
so, Giordano, I excuse me for interrupting. I think I don't want to speak for the chair, but I think that his comment regarding quantification was what we were able to just do was to look at any one of those individual items that you just mentioned and have it paired with a dollar amount that then we could quantify and make a motion on. And I think at this moment we have the list that you just described, but it's not paired with a dollar amount that we can calculate, make a motion. You saw the last motion, we were able to calculate it, have 4 of us do the calculation, check each other, and then make a motion. I think that is when we talk about having a quantitative analysis. I think that is what the chair was referring to, so that we could be expedient in moving forward.
And Mr. Giordano, this is Chairman Bassett. I think this commission needs to make sure that it is consistent. And, to the extent that staff provided a process that they go through, very quantitative, separating out the various elements of the bond. We can't do that with one applicant and not do that for every applicant. Just like we now have generally a staff report that staff prepares when we go and look at an application for conditions associated with the granting of the permit. And we do that so that the commission is comfortable that we have given the necessary look at not only the 30,000 foot level, but the 5,000 foot level. And I think bonds are particularly sensitive to make sure that we are consistent in the process that we follow. And I was quite pleased that the level of detail at which staff was able to prepare the bond request that we dealt with previously. I think we got to go through the same discipline every time there's a bond issue.
Jamie Frederick in the Wetland Agent. So I'm just going to share real quick the bond estimate for this project. So I think ultimately what the commission's looking for, this is a unique situation because ultimately the project that was approved is not completed. And usually right there, the commission doesn't look at reducing the bond unless the items are completely done. So we would need itemization of which of these items have been completed. And I think at this point, essentially what the commission would be looking for is an updated erosion control plan to consider relative to that bond reduction, showing where those erosion controls are needed and where they may not be needed anymore if that's the case. Another thing to keep in mind is the erosion control bond is not just for the installation of the erosion controls, but the continued maintenance of the erosion controls. So, and maybe there's a 2-phase to this. Maybe this is the lull phase and the commission can consider a modification with the phasing of the project. Bond temporarily gets reduced because perhaps at this point, it's at a point where passive erosion controls work. But eventually work is going to start back up, and that work is going to go up to the edge of the retaining wall, and there's going to have to be some sort of erosion control with that. So there's going to need to be, whether it's reverting back to what the approved erosion control plan is now or some modified erosion control plan, the commission would need to know what that is and what it looks like. So I think what the commission needs to consider is an updated plan from the project engineer, an updated itemization from the project engineer. Is that fair to say?
Yes. We'll work on that for the next meeting.
This is Commissioner Bergman. I think it's also really important that that it says in there that if any new activity is going to start, that when you get somebody who's going to develop that place, that we have the whole process start up again. You wouldn't want, but the misunderstanding that the bond has been returned because everything is stable and we don't need to do a whole new erosion sediment control, erosion control, sedimentation plan again.
I guess we review this hopefully for the last time at the May meeting.
Okay. We'll go with that.
Okay, it's time for agent approval. Anything that is worth noting, Amy, on the...
I'm willing to answer questions if commissioners have any, but they're on the agenda in the Dropbox.
Yep, they look straightforward to me. Anything else for this evening, Jamie?
I do not have anything. I don't know if I did notice a member of the public recently joined the meeting. I don't know if you want to open it up to see if anyone from the public has comment or if you want to move on.
I think we've gone through the agenda. Hopefully, if there was an item that a member of the public was interested in, they would have raised their hand.
Okay.
After 10, so I'm entertaining a motion to dissolve this meeting.
So moved. Motion to adjourn.
As a second?
Commissioner Bergman, second.
Great. Meeting is closed. Thank you all.
Good night, all.
Good night.
This program was brought to you in part through the support of the Town of Branford. Watch town meetings and other videos on demand at BranfordTV.org.